What if the person you loved most was born into the family you were taught to hate? What if your parents said, "Stay away from that person," but your heart said, "I cannot"? And what if one small mistake, one terrible misunderstanding, could change the lives of two young lovers forever? Tonight, we are going to travel back hundreds of years to the beautiful city of Verona, Italy. A city filled with beautiful buildings, busy streets, music, celebrations, and a terrible family feud. This is the story of Romeo and Juliet, a story about young love, a story about family hatred, a story about courage, sacrifice, and one heartbreaking misunderstanding. Welcome to English Learning Academy. Listen carefully, enjoy the story, and learn English naturally through storytelling. And don't worry if your English is not perfect. The story is told in simple English, so just relax and let the story begin. Long ago, in the Italian city of Verona, two powerful families lived. One family was called the Montagues, the other was called the Capulets. Both families were wealthy, both families were respected, and both families had beautiful homes, loyal servants, and strong traditions. But there was one thing they had in common: they hated each other. No one could remember exactly why the feud had started. Perhaps it had begun with an old argument. Perhaps it had started with money, pride, or an insult. Whatever the reason, the hatred had continued for years. Even the servants of the two families fought whenever they met. A simple look could become an argument. An argument could become a fight. And a fight could become deadly. He, ruler of Verona, had finally had enough. One day, after another violent fight in the streets, he stood before the people and gave them a serious warning. "Stop this foolish fighting," he said. "If anyone starts another fight between these families, there will be a terrible punishment." The people became silent. But inside the hearts of the Montagues and Capulets, the hatred was still alive. And nobody knew that soon. Their own children would become the center of this ancient conflict. Romeo was a young man from the Montague family. He was not like the angry men who enjoyed fighting. Romeo was thoughtful. He loved poetry. He loved beautiful words. And most of all, he wanted to find true love. But at the beginning of our story, Romeo was unhappy. He believed he was in love with a young woman named Rosalind. Unfortunately, Rosalind did not return his feelings. Romeo spent hours thinking about her. He walked alone through the streets. His friends noticed that something was wrong. "Why are you always sad?" they asked. Romeo sighed. "My heart belongs to someone who does not love me." His friends tried to cheer him up. One evening, they heard some exciting news. The Capulet family was preparing a grand party. There would be music. There would be dancing. There would be food and laughter. Romeo's friends decided to go. At first, Romeo refused. Why would he want to attend a party hosted by the family his family hated? But eventually, he agreed. He put on a mask, he followed his friends, and walked unknowingly toward the most important meeting of his life. The Capulet house was filled with music and light. Guests were dancing, people were laughing. Beautiful clothes filled the room. Because everyone was wearing masks, nobody knew exactly who was who. Romeo entered quietly. He looked around without much interest. He was still thinking about Rosalind. Then he saw Juliet. Everything changed. Juliet was the daughter of Lord Capulet. She was young, intelligent, gentle, and full of life. Romeo stared at her. His friend noticed. "What happened to you?" he asked. Romeo did not answer. He could not take his eyes away from Juliet. He had forgotten Rosalind. He had forgotten the party. He had even forgotten that he was standing inside the house of his family's enemy. He finally walked toward Juliet. They began to speak. Their conversation was simple, but something about it felt different. They smiled. They looked into each other's eyes. And for a few moments, the world around them seemed to disappear. Neither of them knew what was waiting for them. Neither knew that their families were enemies. They only knew one thing: they wanted to see each other again. Later that evening, Juliet asked about the young man she had been speaking to. A servant quietly gave her the answer. "He is Romeo." Juliet froze. "Romeo, the Montague?" "Yes." At the same time, Romeo discovered that Juliet was a Capulet. The girl he had fallen in love with was the daughter of his family's enemy. Romeo whispered to himself, "My love has become my greatest danger." Juliet felt the same fear. But neither of them could simply forget what had happened. That night, Romeo could not go home. He stayed near the Capulet house, and then he heard Juliet's voice. Juliet stood on her balcony, looking into the quiet night. She believed she was alone. She spoke softly about Romeo. She wondered why his name had to belong to the wrong family. Then Romeo stepped forward. Juliet was shocked. "Romeo, what are you doing here?" "I came because I could not stay away from you. But if my family finds you here, they could kill you." Romeo smiled sadly. "I would rather face danger than leave without seeing you." Juliet was frightened, but she was also happy. They talked for a long time. They spoke about their families. They spoke about the future. And finally, they made a decision. If they truly wanted to be together, they would have to marry. Secretly. It was a dangerous choice. But love had already taken control of their hearts. The next morning, Romeo went to Friar Lawrence. Friar Lawrence was a wise and kind priest. Romeo told him about Juliet. The priest was surprised. Only a short time earlier, Romeo had been heartbroken over another girl. Now he was talking about marriage. But Friar Lawrence saw something important. Perhaps this marriage could end the hatred between the Montagues and Capulets. Perhaps two young lovers could bring peace to two angry families. So he agreed to help them. Romeo and Juliet met secretly. There were no crowds. There was no celebration. There was no beautiful wedding party, only a small chapel, a quiet promise, and two young people who believed they had found forever. They became husband and wife for one beautiful moment. Everything seemed perfect, but tragedy was already moving closer. Juliet had a cousin named Tybalt. Tybalt was proud and hot-tempered. He hated the Montagues. He especially hated Romeo. One day, Tybalt found Romeo in the street. "Come and fight me," Tybalt shouted, but Romeo refused. He had a secret reason. Tybalt was now his wife's relative. Romeo did not want to fight him. But Mercutio, Romeo's close friend, did not understand. He became angry with Tybalt. The argument became a fight. Romeo tried to stop them. But suddenly, Tybalt struck Mercutio. Mercutio fell. Romeo rushed to his friend. "Mercutio!" But it was too late. Mercutio was dying. Romeo's heart filled with anger. The peaceful Romeo disappeared. He faced Tybalt. The fight began again, and this time, Tybalt fell dead. Romeo stood silently. He knew his life had changed forever. The ruler of Verona learned what had happened. Romeo had killed Tybalt. But the ruler knew that Tybalt had killed Mercutio first. Instead of ordering Romeo's death, he made another decision. Romeo would be banished. He had to leave Verona. For Romeo, this was almost worse than death. Why? Because Juliet was in Verona. That night, Romeo secretly went to see her. They had only a few hours together. They knew the morning would separate them. Juliet cried. Romeo tried to stay strong. "I will return," he promised. "But what if you cannot?" Juliet asked. Romeo had no answer. When morning came, he had to leave. Juliet watched him disappear. She did not know that this would be the last time they would ever be together. Juliet's parents knew nothing about her secret marriage. They believed she was simply refusing to marry because she was being stubborn. Her father had already chosen another husband for her. His name was Paris. Paris was wealthy, respectable, and well-connected. Juliet's father told her, "You will marry Paris." Juliet tried to explain that she was not ready. But her father became angry. "This marriage will happen." Juliet was terrified. She already had a husband. Her husband was Romeo, but Romeo was far away. She had nowhere to turn, so she returned to Friar Lawrence. "Please," she begged, "you must help me." Friar Lawrence knew that they had very little time. He created a dangerous plan. He gave Juliet a special potion. "This will make you appear to be dead," he explained. "You will sleep deeply for many hours. Your family will believe that you have died. They will place you inside the family tomb. Then Romeo will come for you." The plan sounded frightening. Juliet looked at the bottle. She imagined waking up alone in a dark tomb. She imagined nobody coming. She imagined the plan failing. But she also imagined marrying another man. She could not accept that life, so she took the bottle, and she made her choice. That night, Juliet drank the potion. The next morning, her family found her lying motionless. They believed she was dead. Their happiness disappeared. The wedding decorations were replaced with funeral arrangements. The house that had been preparing for a wedding became a house filled with tears. Juliet was carried to the family tomb. Everyone mourned her. But Juliet was still alive. She was only sleeping. Friar Lawrence had already arranged for Romeo to receive a message. Romeo would come. He would wake her. They would escape together. It was a perfect plan, except for one terrible problem. The message never reached Romeo. Romeo was far from Verona. He was waiting for news, but the messenger could not reach him. Instead, another person arrived. Romeo's servant brought terrible news. "Master, Juliet is dead." Romeo stared at him. "No. I saw her family preparing her funeral." "No," Romeo repeated. But the servant was certain. Romeo's world collapsed. He had already lost his home. He had already lost his friend. Now he believed he had lost Juliet. Romeo made a terrible decision. "If Juliet is dead," he said, "then I do not want to live." He obtained poison. Then he returned secretly to Verona. He was going to Juliet's tomb. He believed he was going there to say goodbye, but he was actually walking toward his death. The night was quiet when Romeo entered the tomb. He saw Juliet lying there. She looked peaceful, beautiful, almost as if she were simply sleeping. Romeo sat beside her. He spoke to her. "I wish I could have given you a better life. I wish our families had never hated each other. I wish we had more time." Then Romeo looked at Juliet one final time. He drank the poison. And within moments, he died beside the woman he loved. But tragedy was not finished. A little later, Juliet opened her eyes. She looked around. She saw the dark tomb. Then she saw Romeo. At first, she thought everything had gone according to plan. "Romeo." But he did not answer. She touched him. He was cold. Juliet suddenly understood. The plan had failed. Romeo had believed she was dead, and now Romeo was truly dead. Juliet cried. She held his hand. She wished she could wake him, but she could not. She had lost the person she loved most. She saw Romeo's dagger nearby. She knew what she was about to do. Juliet looked at Romeo one last time. Then she made her final choice. She stayed beside him, and her life ended there. Soon the families arrived. They discovered the terrible scene. Romeo, Juliet, both dead. The Montagues and Capulets stood together in silence. For the first time, they were not thinking about their hatred. They were thinking about what their hatred had cost them. 2 young lives, 2 families, so much pain. Lord Capulet looked at Lord Montague. Neither man had anything left to say. Their children had paid the price for their old hatred. Finally, the 2 families made peace. The feud that had lasted for years came to an end. Romeo and Juliet had wanted nothing more than to be together. They never got the peaceful life they dreamed about. But their deaths finally taught their families a lesson. Hatred had destroyed what love had created. Romeo and Juliet is remembered as a love story, but it is also a warning. A warning about anger, a warning about pride, a warning about family hatred, and a warning about misunderstanding. Sometimes we hold on to anger for so long that we forget why we were angry in the first place. Sometimes we judge people because of their family, their background, or their name. And sometimes we realize the truth only when it is too late. Romeo and Juliet could not change their families, but their story changed those families forever. Their love ended a hatred that had lasted for generations. And perhaps that is the most powerful message of their story. Love should never be destroyed by hatred. Before we finish, let's remember some useful English words from today's story. Feud means a long and angry fight between two people or families. Hatred means a very strong feeling of dislike. Banish means to force someone to leave a place. Exile means being forced to live away from your home. Potion means a special liquid, often used like medicine. Grief means deep sadness after losing someone. Misunderstanding means understanding something in the wrong way. And finally, devotion means strong love and loyalty toward someone. And this was the unforgettable story of Romeo and Juliet, two young hearts caught between love and hatred. If you enjoyed this story, don't worry if you couldn't understand every word. Listen to it again. Try to repeat some of the sentences. Write down the new vocabulary. And slowly, your English will become stronger. This is what we do here at English Learning Academy. We learn English through stories. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to English Learning Academy, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. And remember, listen, learn, speak, improve. Thank you for watching. See you in our next beautiful story. Goodbye and keep learning.